Should I kick things off, Lauren, or you tell me when? We'll probably wait another minute and then we'll officially start. All right. My name is George Luke, CEO and co-founder of GivePulse, a platform to coordinate, track, and assess all community engagement activity. It is obviously, without needing to say it, such a privilege to be with great company here and for us to kick off an additional session as a follow-up from the one we did in December with lots of new updates and timelines. Even more, we are honored to be thought partners to determine how to best leverage technology to amplify the access, research potential, and international scale for the classifications. A little housekeeping before I pass this off to Lauren and team here. I want to let you know that we do have this webinar recorded and it will be shared back to those attending this call. As with all webinars, there's a Q&A section, and I'm sure the panel and I will make sure that we will answer the questions throughout the discussion, and also a chat option for you to chat and answer your questions. So thank you again for the opportunity, and I look forward to innovating and doing the hard work with you all. Lauren?
Thanks so much, George. My name is Lauren Bartshe, and I am the Associate Director of the Carnegie Elective Classification Central Office. And I'm joined today by my co-panelists, Dr. Marisol Morales, who is the Executive Director, and Dr. John Saltmarsh, who's our Consulting Scholar. And today we're going to talk about some updates on the Carnegie Elective Classification for Community Engagement, and we look forward to sharing with you.
So hello, everyone. Can't see you, but I'm seeing the numbers increase and excited to be able to share with you today. As some of you may know, we have a new host. The American Council on Education and the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching have partnered to pull both the basic or universal as well as the elective classifications together under one new home. So we're excited about that transition that officially takes place on March 15th. But with all that said, we are continuing as scheduled with the release of the community engagement classification. And even through this transition, we are ready to go. So Lauren, over to you.
Thanks, Marisol. So today we're going to talk about directing for both the first-time applicants and campuses that are reclassifying, so those who classified last in 2015. And today we will talk about updates on the current status of the classification, some background and definitions on the community engagement classification, an overview of the 2024 timeline and frameworks, strategies that have been effective for applicants in the past, and then we'll dive into a question and answer session. So first, a bit of the timeline for both first-time and reclassification institutions. The 2024 cycle is as follows. The framework, which is the documentation or the questions for the application, was released in January and are already available on our website. Next week, on March 1st, you'll be able to access the application on GivePulse. Our application deadline will be May 1st, 2023. We'll have a review period, and then campuses will be notified in December 2023, the public announcement in January 2024. If you're not quite ready to apply, we're going to launch the next cycle in 2026. Means that the application will be available in January 2024, an application deadline in April or May 25. And the same thing, campus notified in 2025 and a public announcement in 2026. We've been getting a lot of questions about when campuses need to reclassify. So when the last classification launched in 2020, we switched to a classification cycle starting every 2 years instead of every 5 years, and reclassification or classification lasting for 6 instead of 10. That means that campuses that classified in 2015 were originally set for reclassification in 2025. Those campuses can elect to reclassify in this cycle for 2024 or wait until 2026. You will hold your classification through 2026. There's no notification process. You can just elect to do so as you will. Campuses that classified in 2006, 8, or 10, but have not reclassified will need to reapply using the first-time classification framework.
So one thing that we want to emphasize at the very beginning here is the importance of the definition that the Carnegie Foundation provides for community engagement. There are going to be 2 slides here, one around the process of engagement and one around the purpose. So I just want to say a few things. One is that it's really important to pay attention to the definition in terms of the process, that this is seen as something which is about mutually beneficial reciprocal relationships with community partners, right? So community engagement has this fundamental quality of recognizing and valuing the knowledge assets which are in the community and bringing those together with the knowledge assets at the university or college. And this is really core to how the foundation thinks about community engagement. And on the next slide, it talks about the purpose of engagement, particularly around education for democratic citizens and civic agency, all with the idea of being able to address social issues in communities with a larger sense of the public good. And we say all of that in part because there are a lot of really good activities that go on campus that sometimes are called community engagement, but don't fit under this definition. And we're not saying that those aren't important, it's just not what the foundation classifies. So just pay attention to the definition and pay attention to particularly the qualities around the process and purpose in the definition. You can go to the next slide, Lauren. The other thing that we want you just to think about is that this is fundamentally a benchmarking tool. And what we mean by that is the responses that you provide in the application, or what we often call the documentation framework, are mainly descriptive. And this is self-reported data that you're providing, which is also a limitation in many ways, because we're not like an accrediting team where we're going to come in and visit your campus. We're relying on the evidence that you provide us, and we're trusting that that's candid. And then the other part that we think about as a benchmarking tool is that you're being evaluated essentially against standards of best practice in the field. These are standards that have been developed over a long period of time, have constantly been refined over time, and that's why the questions in the application get changed, not a lot, but they do get changed periodically. Another really important point is this is not a hierarchy. You don't get like a high classification and a low classification, or high engaged, low engaged. Everybody gets either you're classified or you're not. So there's no hierarchy. And it is this real sort of wonderful space to tell your campus's story about the unique approach that you take to community engagement. And if you think about the application that way, as telling a story, creating a narrative about the work that you're doing, that's actually a really good approach.
Thanks so much, John. So before we launch into talking about the documentation framework, we're going to run a quick poll of our viewers today, asking 2 questions, helping us understand what classification you might be seeking, a first-time classification or reclassification, and what kind of institution you're currently with.
So we're waiting for those results to come in. We will be doing a set of, we'll be answering questions at the end, but if folks want to take advantage of the Q&A portion of this or aspect of this webinar, please put the questions in there, and then we'll be sharing resources via the chat.
All right, so let's dive a little bit into the documentation framework. The documentation framework is what we call the application. So this application is, update to the structure of the framework and what that looks like. So for the 2024 cycle, we've worked a lot with GivePulse to make some updates to help maybe ease the process on applicants. So one thing that we've done is integrated iPEDS data into the classification to do two things. So when you log into the application for the first time and create an account, so your kind of primary account holder, you'll enter in the campus's unit ID for iPEDS. And that'll pull in information to the application, such as enrollment data, number of full-time faculty automatically. So you have to go digging for those numbers. And it'll also help assess an application fee, which we can talk about a little bit later. And so that'll kind of streamline some of this process. The application is also structured around smaller thematic sections instead of larger sections with multiple subfields. The goal is to help improve clarity about what kind of information should be included in a question, and to also help kind of capture maybe smaller chunks for campuses to work on over time together. We've also tried to reduce the amount of information being asked within questions, especially if you're part of a reclass institution or you've reviewed past applications. You might notice kind of extensive kind of tabular questions that wanted a lot of examples. Most questions now that want a lot of information have been reduced with the model of something like describe at least 2 but no more than 4 examples. And so what that looks like. So here we have a screenshot from the application in GivePulse. Across the top of the application are the different section numbers. So you can even kind of access the different sections of the application without actually having to fill out any questions. So you can choose when you'd like to work on it in one section at a time. The application also kind of acts a little bit like a Google Doc, in that whenever you input information, it's there. If you delete it, it goes away. But it also automatically saves each response. And also will notify you that response has been saved by a little flashing green save sign, so you know that your work has been captured. The application this year also features a collaboration function. So after someone logs in for the first time and creates an account, they can add collaborators, as many as you like from your institution or other community partners, to contribute to the application. Then with that, on the response itself, on the bottom, it lists who was the last collaborator and when they worked on that question. So let's say you all had a team meeting, you were talking about adding a contribution, you can see that contribution was inputted. There's also word count markers on every single question as well, so you know how many words you've already been typing in. Most of the questions are capped at 500 words, with a select few tapped at 1,000 words. This example that's here on the screen is one of those. We also recognize that with COVID, that many institutions have faced multiple challenges, especially regarding to how community engagement is acted out on your campuses and in your communities. So for this application cycle, we're going to be very flexible on which data you select to use. That may be that you select to use data from the year most prior to COVID, so the 18-19 year, or you might use something within the actual COVID period, so 19-20, 2021, or 21-22. Campuses will have the flexibility to select which data they'd like to be using throughout the application. And we ask you that you specify which year your data is from within your actual application response. So that helps you be able to tell the stories that best capture the work that you've been doing over the last few years, and recognize that some numbers may be impacted or stories may be impacted by what your campuses and communities experienced. So to go through a little bit of the application sections. So it's actually broken up after the first login information that kind of captures who the primary contact is for the campus. It delves into 13 sections that are thematically oriented. The first, thinking about campus and community context. So what does your campus look like in the community surrounding it? We have a section asking about quality of community engagement relationships. So what constitutes as being a high quality relationship with your community? We have a section on academic, community, and campus partnerships that asks you to describe different institutional and campus partners. If you're a reclassification campus, you might this has replaced the former campus partnership grid. We have information on institutional identity and culture, infrastructure and finance, campus-wide tracking, monitoring, and assessment. So the what you are doing to assess community engagement on your campuses, then the outcomes and impacts. So the what you have learned and what you're doing about it. Faculty and staff engagement with community engagement, curricular engagement, co-curricular engagement, pathways for student development, have an other initiatives section, and the conclusion is on reflection, a consent for research, and links to the partnership survey. We also recognize other challenges beyond COVID within the application this year, and that many campuses have been affected by not only COVID, but also the greater attention to racial justice in our communities, the crisis of decreasing trust in American democracy, and natural disasters. So we've included a question in the application that specifically allows you and encourages you to let us know how your campuses and communities have been impacted by these national and global events. For reclassification institutions, the model is very similar to the first time application, but asks a little bit more of campuses to think about what currently exists on your campus, changes since the last application, and then relevant supporting evidence. And so the narrative structure is a bit more complex. Reclassification institutions are also allowed to use links as supporting evidence within some of the application questions, and they're notified where that should be. But first-time applications should not be using links at all, and they will be ignored or they'll be wasting space within the application section. So take it away, Marisol.
Lauren. So we want to cover some strategies for approaching the framework that hopefully will help you as you're going through the process of doing the applications. So, you know, we have a team of folks who have reviewed the 2020 application process, and some of the areas of focused attention that this team identified that we want to make sure we share with folks as they're preparing for this new application are the following. Thinking about reciprocal partnerships. So, you know, partnerships require a high level of understanding and intentionality in the practices, specifically around reciprocity and mutuality. So making sure that you're selecting partnerships between your institution and the community that reflect reciprocity and mutuality and lifting those up. Faculty and staff reward and development. So thinking about the ways, whether there is language in the tenure and promotion guidelines within your institution, what kinds of awards, but making sure that those are included and the ways in which they are connected to the community partners. The kinds of infrastructure that may exist on your campus. So maybe it is a centralized system, maybe it's a decentralized system, but thinking about the ways that you talk about and explain for the reviewers the infrastructure that exists on your campus to support community engagement efforts. Assessment. So thinking about the ways that this is assessed both with community partners as well as through student learning outcomes and even faculty evaluations. Curricular engagement is an important part of this, especially in regards to the institutionalization of community engagement. So where that is showing up within your institution, maybe it's specific majors, maybe it is scaffolded programs within your institutions. And then specifically, and we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, the impacts on minoritized students and faculty. And if we can go to the next slide, Lauren. Thanks. So these are two questions that are in the framework, in the application, that highlights the research that we've seen, particularly from the NESE survey. And so thinking about this as a high impact practice, and us knowing that students of color have higher participation rates in community engagement. So thinking about the ways that this is showing up, how are you tracking this within your institution? What outcomes are you seeing with this? And then also we know from research that female faculty and minoritized faculty tend to do community engagement more. So the ways that identity demographics are connected to community engagement. So we want to think about the ways that you're thinking about this on campus, the way that you're supporting these folks on campus who are doing this work. Next slide. Assessment. So one of the things we've heard is that it feels like we're answering the same question multiple times. And so thinking about the distinctions that exist in what we want to talk about regarding assessment. So we're talking about assessing community perceptions of institutional engagement, and there's a few different ways that we do that. One is we ask you how you do that. How do you know you're doing a good job? How do you know that you're getting feedback from your community partners? How do you know that? How do you know that you're sharing that feedback internally to then make adjustments? So where is that collected within your institution? And then there's an opportunity for you to share with us the contact information for your community partners, and they will be sent a survey responding to this as well. So there's multiple places where we're collecting that. One is where you collected in terms of perceptions, the other one's directly from community partners. Thinking about tracking and reporting of institution-wide engagement data. So is there a software system you use? Do you tag courses? What ways do you know that this is happening? Can you track it across your institution, both in curricular engagement as well as co-curricular engagement? And then assessing the impact of community engagement on students, faculty, community partners, as well as the institution. Thinking about maybe the ways that this is showing up in a strategic plan or a civic action plan. Where do you feel like there's opportunities and outcomes that you're able to demonstrate and let us and share with the reviewers? And then the identification and assessment of student learning outcomes. What are they? How do you know? How do you review them? And then what are ongoing mechanisms, feedback mechanisms for partnerships? Is there an advisory committee you have? Is there a survey that you have? What kinds of feedback mechanisms exist with your institution? Next slide. I will say, back to the other slide, there are two sections 7 and 8, that look at assessment, and they're looking at those sort of differently. One is the what and how, so what do you do and how do you do it? And the second part is the outcomes and impacts. And so being able to sort of think about that and distinguish those things are going to be really important as the reviewers are, one, getting an understanding of how this exists on your campus, and two, where are you seeing the impact of this through the work that you're doing. Okay, next slide. So we are here to support you. There will be many more workshops throughout the year to help you through this process. There are guides on our website that you can find, other printable guides, and you have access to the questions. We promised that it would be available January 27th. We lived up to that given the transition, and then the portal will be open March 1st. That portal allows you to, one, sign up and pay for access to the application, but two, begin working on it in the portal and saving it, as you're working on it with collaborators. But you will have the opportunity to have guides and resources. These webinars and other trainings will be posted on our website as resources for you. The other piece I would say is making sure you bring together a cross-institutional team with community representation to work on the application. This is an opportunity for your institution to do a self-study. It is an opportunity for you to go deep in the weeds. It's an opportunity for you to go wide. right? And so taking advantage of either the interest of administration in having the institution receive the elective classification, or interest in from your community in having this happen, but thinking about the benefits of creating a cross-institutional team to both help you gather the data, but also hear those different voices around where engagement is happening across campus and with the community. Next slide. We want to be able to have understanding of authentic community engagement that's described across activities. So we want you to think about those partnerships, not just your programs within your institutions, but the partnerships. So it may be one community partner that there's several programs within your institution that partner with that organization. That's what we want you to focus on, not just the program that's within your institution, but that partnership, even if it's layered, even if it's sort of multiplied by different departments partnering with the same institution. We want you to describe those successes, but also when things don't go well. We know that this is a learning document as well. And so being able to say, you know what, we didn't make the best choice, or, it didn't go well this way, but we learned so much. And the next time around, we did this, especially since, you're going to probably pull data from the time of COVID when we were all trying to figure this out without any real roadmap. And so the ability to describe successes as well as kind of learning opportunities is going to be really important. And then selecting the most important and compelling evidence is going to also be important. You may have tons of data and tons of information, but let's focus, right? We ask you for a certain range of projects and examples to help give us a better understanding of how this is working on your campus, setting that context for us. And the ones that you felt like maybe they didn't work out the best way, but they're ones that maybe created deeper relationships with the community, that you didn't do it right the first time, but you learned from that. And the second time you had a much more profound and impactful engagement experience. Those are the stories that we want to hear. And then just some basic concluding advice. Don't leave any blanks. If you don't have the answers, that's okay. Just tell us you don't. That might be something that you're working on or something that you haven't gotten to, but please answer everything. Thinking about alignment and triangulation, that also is connected to the sort of coherent narrative, making sure that when we're reading it, we see the connections that's happening, and then you're pointing out those connections, and that the application is coming through with one solid voice, right? We can tell when several people have written this and it's just a little bit disjointed. And so making sure that you have a coherent narrative, that you're not contradicting each other, and that there's alignment between the things that you say, right, and the examples and evidence that you provide. Again, institutional perspective, the cross-institutional team is key, including campus as a whole, not just one part of campus. So, thinking about maybe procurement in the way that there may be community benefit agreements with through procurement, thinking about this sort of different unusual suspects, right, that might be really beneficial for bringing in to the narrative of how engagement is happening across campus. And then, include engagement that has been implemented, not aspired to. You have to have done something, right? You're applying for a classification because you have done something. And so there may be things that you haven't gotten to yet, or you're in the process. You can talk about that, but it's about what you have done and where you're showing the impact of that doing. Slide. Just to reiterate, this is the timeline. Again, we've already released it March 1st. You will have access to the portal. You can look through it. We'll send information via GivePulse, social media, on our website, but you'll have access to begin signing up. The deadline will be May 2023, so over a year. And then campuses will be notified in December, and the public announcement in January. I will say we will be doing a peer review process. And so sometime during this timeline, this cycle, we will be doing a call for reviewers. So we want to make sure, so if that's something that you're interested in, serving as a reviewer of other campuses who applied for Carnegie, just be on the lookout for that, because we will be doing that call. For the 2026 cycle, again, the application deadline it'll be released in January 2024. Application deadline April 2025, and the same in terms of notification and release and the public announcement. Next slide. So for again, for campuses that were classified in 2015, we decided to reduce the cycle. There's too much that happens within 10 years, too much change within institutions, particularly leadership change. And so we thought that a 6-year classification designation is more accurate for the kinds of changes that we're seeing in our institutions. But those who classified in 2015 have the option of doing this year, the 2024, or the 2026 cycle. And again, we leave it up to you. You don't have to notify us, just when you're ready, sign on and apply. Here are some resources. Again, our website, carnegieelectiveclassifications.org, has tons of resources. This book that we published a few years back is another great guide for you to access knowledge and resources. And then we're going to talk a little bit about consultants. So the Carnegie Elective Classification, we don't work with individual campuses. We will do things like this that have multiple campuses because we want to be able to avoid conflict of interest. Starting in spring and early summer, there will be a group of certified consultants available to support individual campuses and groups of institutions for workshops and webinars. I'm saying this because we have had issues in the past with folks serving as consultants for institutions without really having a grasp of the application and really not serving those institutions well. And so we will do a call for consultants. We will train a set of consultants. We will have the information for those folks available on our website. And those are the ones, if your institution is looking to have a consultant help with the applications, that we suggest that you utilize, because they have received the certification through us to be able to do this. And we trust that their work will be ones that serve the institutions that they're consulting with. All right, great. We stuck to time. We wanted to spend most of our time answering questions, which we see there's several of them. So I don't know, George, if you want to kind of go through the list and open it up to questions that folks might have.
Not gonna lie, John did a really good job of just answering all the questions.
Oh, perfect.
With him, every single time I was like trying to answer something, he's like, oh.
Great.
Come on in, George.
You are totally.
Any other questions?
I tossed our resources link into the chat, so you can direct to our website to find the guide, publication information, anything else that might help you. I put that in the chat.
Perfect. I see a question about, are the consultants costly? We don't set the prices for the consultants. They set the prices on their own. All we're doing is certifying that they have the accurate information to share with you. So that is for the individual institution to negotiate with the individual consultant, but you'll have a list of several, so you can shop around.
Marisol, you want to talk about the one where it asks about, are there individual questions that disqualify? Do you see that one?
I do not. Hold on. Okay. Okay. No, that will not disqualify you. And it's also going to be depending on the context of your institution, right? And so is it a best practice? Yes. Can every institution do that? No. Are there other ways for compensation of community partners, you know, whether that is a title on campus, whether that's access to be able to serve as an adjunct. Every campus will do it differently, but that will not disqualify you. But talk about maybe what process, has there been conversation about that on your campus? What are your hopes? What are other ways that you might honor the time and energy of the community in this process that's not just necessarily monetarily?
Yeah, and I would just add, Marisol, for a question like this, the reviews are done in a holistic manner. So there's not any one question or even set of questions that will prevent you from being classified.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So they're all taken together and they're all kind of triangulated with one another to try to understand what the whole picture looks like. So.
Right. How many years do we report on? We are looking at, because of COVID, usually you would do this past academic year, but we are allowing for campuses to do 2018, 2019, which was the full year before COVID. You just need to indicate that in the application, and you can go back and forth between sort of years that you're giving data on. We just need the indication of that in the narrative piece. So just making sure you're keeping track of that and that you're identifying easily for the reviewers to be able to know that. I will say that the applications will be reviewed by a team. And so the piece that John said about the holistic review is really important because we want to see that there are things that are being done, that there's a deep understanding of the best practices, that there's a contextualization of the institution and the communities that you're working with. And then if you're reclassifying based on the last classification and this one, how have things changed? How have you seen improvements? Where's evidence of that improvement?
So there's a question on here about branch campuses. And if you go to the website, there's actually a specific policy on that. But just to answer your question, yeah, it's actually your choice. What we're recognizing is that branch campuses can end up in very different communities. And so the relationships with those communities can also be really different. So as of the last cycle, 2020, you could either come in as a single campus with all the branch campuses, but that means also data from all of them together, or you could choose just one of those branch campuses. Right, and just focus the data on that because that particular campus may have really strong community engagement where the other campuses don't.
Okay, so there's a question about if we were classified in the past but did not retain classification in 2015, would we submit for the first time a reclassification? If you were not reclassified in 2015, then you are doing a first time application. Can we reshare the website? If a institution applies for reclassification 2024 and does not receive, could they reapply for reclassification 2026? Or do we choose one or the other? John, can you answer that one?
That's actually a really good question. I don't know that we've quite figured that out because you have the choice at this point to pick one or the other. So if you weren't classified in 2024, I think the way I would answer that is yes, you can do it in 2026 as a first-time applicant.
Yeah. Okay. What do you anticipate would be the benefits to institutions to reapply in the 2024 cycle versus the 2026 cycle? I think it just depends on where your institution is right now. If you expect any leadership changes, I would say that would be something. And, are you in the midst of a strategic plan? Are you doing a civic action plan? How are those supporting these? So I think it's an individual campus's decision. It just really depends on the context of it. I would say that in this cycle, you can use 2018, 2019, as well as this past year's, that's not going to be the case. Like you'll have to, for the next cycle, you'll have to do the most recent one. So there may be like really great things that came out of this COVID situation with the community partners that you want to highlight and you're proud of. And so making use of the 2024 application might be a benefit for you, but it's sort of an individual campus's decision.
So there's a question on here from Rosa about an APLU working group. And the way that I understand the question is, would we help coordinate that by letting them know which APLU campuses are applying for the application? Rosa, the answer to that, and from the very beginning of the classification, is no. And the reason for that is when campuses are classified, we only share the information about those that are classified and not of those that weren't successful. And the reason for that is the foundation from the very beginning just did not want to in any way sort of punish a campus for trying the application and not being successful. So the answer is no, we wouldn't help you coordinate that because we wouldn't reveal that information.
Can we talk more about the fees? Lauren, do we have the fee kind of chart right now? Or
Let me pull it up real quick. Let me switch over to our website. 1 second.
perfect. So we tried to implement an equity model when it came to the fees. So we're doing it on based on expenditures per student, and then enrollment. So instructional expenses per FTE, as well as what your enrollment size is. When you put in your iPads data into the system, when you first come in, it will automatically calculate what your fee is for your institution based on the iPads data that we have. So all you have to do is get your iPads number. I put a link to iPads. Your institutional research office should have that number, but you can also look it up on that Department of Ed website, and it will calculate it for you. If institutions need a fee waiver, you can just email us directly, and we will walk you through the process of that fee waiver. Okay, let's see.
So Marisol, Todd is asking about a resource for a readiness check. Todd, I don't know about that. So, and we don't currently have something like that. What I would do is just use the application that's available and go through it and just kind of get a sense of how you're doing, right? And where you would, what kind of data you would provide in the application to see if you're ready.
Yeah. The other thing I would say is that, you know, when I was at Laverne, there was an expectation that we would apply because our president was very interested in that. You know, at first I was like, I don't think we're going to get it. Like we, you know, the office just started, but upon, well, we didn't have a choice, we needed to apply. But upon doing it, it was what we uncovered, you know, was really revealing in that process of the self-study. And we did end up getting it. So even though at first I was a little hesitant and thinking that we weren't going to get it, going through the process actually showed how much we really did have and how much we were able to share through this application to successfully then achieve the classification. So I would say that, you know, even if you go through it and there are things that you feel like you can't answer or you haven't done yet, or you're in the process of, just the process of doing it is such a benefit because it also tells you what are areas that you need to work towards and what are conversations that need to happen across campus to get to a point where, you know, there's no question about whether or not you should, you are ready to apply for the application and receive it.
So to say what Marisol just said a little bit differently, this is actually not about getting classified. It's about the process. Right? The process is like, this is an excuse for you to go through that process. And the other part I would say is if you decide to go through it, kind of thinking we're never going to get this, you may not get it, but you will get the opportunity after the process is over to meet with someone from the team and go through your application specifically, not like the general feedback that will come out in the letters that go out, but specific feedback for your application. What we have found in the past is that those conversations and that specific feedback has been enormously helpful and led to then a successful application in the next cycle. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah. For campuses that are considering applying but aren't quite sure of the process quite yet, do know that the questions are already available on our website. So you don't have to pay for the application and start diving in. You can already start accessing them, building out a team and thinking about if it's the right step for you. So please, access those questions on our website and look through for yourself.
And just in terms of the sort of payment piece of the application, you actually will pay when you go into log on to GivePulse at the beginning to give you access to the portal. And then, but you don't have to submit. So you will do it beforehand. If throughout the process you decide that you're not going to submit, then you can request a refund for the fee. But we're asking folks to pay the fee ahead of time, and then you will have to the deadline to submit the application.
To add on to that, Marisol, I think one of the things that also I appreciated from previous years was also submitting it, even though they knew that they weren't even close to completing it, because the reviewers got the opportunity to provide feedback too as well. So that's also probably something to consider.
Right. Thanks, George. I want to make sure we get all the questions. So we can put our, I think the next slide has our email addresses that you can, so our website and our info. We have a Q&A document on the website. So we're going to be sort of like your professor, read the syllabus, read the Q&A portion first. And if the answer is not there, then feel free to reach out to us directly. But we try to sort of, we learn every time we do one of these. And so we take the questions and we make sure that we add additional questions that come up that may not be in that Q&A document. So we'll continue to update that, but look there first. Most of the information that you're asking should be there. And if not, we're happy to have conversations with folks. Is it still possible to get individualized feedback if you applied in 2019 for 2020 and didn't receive the classification?
I would say probably not at this point.
Yeah. We got a lot happening right now with the transition, so that would be a little hard. Let's see. So yes, the application will, again, like Lauren said, the questions are already up on our website, so you can take a look and delve in. Think about who you would want to have your team be, but the portal for you to actually start answering questions, paying the fee, doing all of that stuff will open March 1st via GivePulse, and we'll do a big blast on social media as well as our website with that information. And then as we'll send out emails to folks who've registered for different workshops, so you should get it through via email as well.
I'm getting some questions in the chat about where the questions are located on the website. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick view of the website to show you all where it's at.
Great.
All right, while you're doing that, Lauren, so I think I may have created some confusion answering one of the questions. So let me go back to it. When you're providing data on the application, in a perfect world, we would like the data from the full academic year prior to when you're submitting the application or when you're putting it together. Given we're not in a perfect world, we're saying to you, use the data which is most accurate, which may be before COVID hit. But you also may have data which isn't the last full academic year, but maybe more recent. And that's fine too. You can use that data. Just whenever you provide data, make it clear when that data is coming from, so we understand the context. Another way to say that is, like, we really don't want data from 10 years ago. That's not telling us anything. So we need to know when it's coming from. So I hope that helps.
All right, folks. So our website is Carnegie Elective Classifications with an S.org. This is our homepage. If you come up here to the Carnegie Elective Classification for Community Engagement, the drop-down menu, the kind of first tab here is going to be an overview, big picture of the whole classifications. This resources page here, and there's FAQ. On the resources page, you will find links to the first time framework, reclassification framework. Those are the document questions. And then we have the guides as well. So the guides list the questions plus a further explanation of kind of diving into the rationale or the reasoning behind those questions and what we're looking for. We also added a resource called Gathering Evidence and Forming a Team. If this helps you, it asks questions such as, where might you find the evidence? Are there other things on campus that are going on with accreditation or strategic planning that also might be helpful for you? Who should be on your team, and kind of a planning guide. And we also have information here on kind of future webinars we're going to be doing and workshops where you can find us, past recordings. And we will also be adding sample applications from the 2020 cycle of applicants that were successful. Those are coming really soon, so you can look at kind of previous responses. So please, if you have any, this is a kind of your go-to guide here. And again, it's on our website under the resources tab, and it's kind of middle, classification for community engagement. And if you, hopefully this helps you all out with finding us on the web.
For folks who are interested in serving as consultants, when we're ready, we'll post. So just keep on checking back to our website. We will post the call for consultants on the application, and then we're expecting it sort of late spring, early summer is when the call will come out. Okay.
And the fee matrix is going to be on the main overview page of the 2024 classification. So that first tab is where it's going to be located.
And then Elizabeth was asking how late they could wait to make a decision about paying to access the portal. I think that the answer to that is you can wait as long as you want. But
well, I think we made a different decision.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. So we are looking towards probably October 1st, given that, I'm sorry, not October, October 31st, given that we have to make sure we have enough reviewers for the cycle. So we're going to need some time to do a call for reviewers, train those reviewers. So we want to have a sense of how many applications we're going to need to plan for. So I'd say around October 31st is when you should be able to decide. We'll clarify that on the website, but that's kind of some initial discussions that we've had and thinking about, how do we do the call for reviewers with enough time to train and make sure that everybody's ready to review and that we can get the results back in time for folks. Any other questions? Okay. And then the question about the 2026 classification being based on 2023, 2024 data. Got any thoughts?
So 2026, you would be starting you could start in January 2023. So I think the data you really need for that one is from 2022, 23.
Yeah. You wouldn't start till January 24. So it'd probably be Correct, 23, 24. Yeah,
So is that right? 23, 24?
yeah, that's right. Because it
Okay.
opens in January 24. Yeah. There's also a question if you can be a reviewer, if you're also going to submit in this cycle. And I believe that's a yes. We would just not make sure you're assigned to a campus, different campuses. There's no conflict of interest. Is that correct, Marisol?
Yep. So there's a conflict of interest form that each reviewer will have to sign. So you can't review for a place that you work for, and we might probably also include a place that you worked for previously. So so that's why we're going to need the time to be able to sort of think about those things and do the create the teams around each review. So we put the questions, I put a link to the questions in the chat, and that's what Lauren showed you recently. Yes, all right.
There's a question from Poonam. I'm guessing it's referencing the one from 452. Answers to all questions should be from a single academic year, or can it be in multiple academic years?
It can be multiple academic years. You just have to, again, specify it. Because this is such a narrative-based application, then you'll have the opportunity within the narrative to say, this data is from, academic year XYZ, and you'll put that in the narrative. And you can switch. It's just, remember, the reviewer is seeing this, so you want to make sure that you're clear in every answer which academic year you're referring to the data and the examples. And I say, if you're gonna, in some sections you have to put like 4 examples, I'd say try to keep those from the same academic year within the same section. That would probably be helpful too. Is there a set number of institutions that get approved each cycle, or does it vary? We have an average number, but it just depends on the quality of the application. This is a time-consuming process. We don't want it or expect it to be easy. We expect it to be rigorous and one that creates the opportunity for some deep self-study and reflection for an institution, and that shows good practice. And so it will vary, but we're hoping that given the level of support that we provide, that we have high quality applications that are submitted and then reviewed and approved. Are you aware of which lists rankings might directly reference the CE classification?
None that I know of.
Yeah. I also have a question about what would the qualifications be for reviewers? For folks who are interested in maybe applying in the future.
Yeah, we will get that information out. At the minimum, I would expect that you would have had to participated in the application process. It may not be at the institution that you're at, but maybe a previous institution that you were at, but you have to kind of know what this process is to be able to effectively review the applications. So the host institution going forward is the American Council on Education, ACE. And so the sort of official move is March 15th, but we'll be in kind of transition the next few months as we move everything over. But yes, it was announced a few weeks back that Carnegie is partnering with ACE to host. And I want to also clarify, it is not just the community engagement classification, but it is an umbrella of classification. So both the basic, which will be titled the universal, that includes the economic mobility, indicators, as well as the community engagement one. There's going to be a classification around leadership for public purpose that will also be housed at ACE through this partnership, along with the international community engagement classifications. And there's opportunities for other classifications to be developed in the years to come. So we're excited about the ability to kind of house it under one roof, and also the future development of additional classifications that help with creating transformative change on our campuses around specific issues. So our goal was to keep this an hour. We have a little more time if there's additional questions, but if people need to get going, feel free to do so. Any updates on some of the other elective classifications that are being explored? Like I said, the leadership for public purpose, there's some interest in Indigenous serving institutions, a classification around that, sustainability, and really depends on what the higher ed landscape is interested in, and suggestions that come from the higher education field. I think we have answered most of those questions. Is there anything else? Great, we're happy that the session was helpful. We want to be able to, when we have these sessions, provide the information, but also really spend time answering questions that folks may have. Please use that info at Carnegie Elective Classifications.org. We're happy to answer those and be of service to our engagement community as you explore and go through this process.
So George, thanks for hosting this. Really appreciate it.
He is a rock star partner.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
And we should turn off the recording right now. Let's do that for now.
Sure.